I think that it's got to be separated and just say, like I said, why is this so difficult? Just put it in your offer.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Shawn and Matt Show. My name is Matt. That is Shawn, and welcome to our show. Shawn, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about commissions as we have in the past couple weeks. Actually, it's been, 2 or 3 weeks since our last show.
Yeah.
And ironically enough, it's been about 2 weeks since the new commission rules have gone into effect on August 17th. So let's get into it immediately, Shawn. And if you're just trying to understand the commission rules, the change is that you are no longer allowed to advertise or to offer a buyer broker compensation on the MLS. Did I explain that in the simplest, easiest, shortest way?
That's the way it should be explained. We're no longer allowed to see it on the MLS. We cannot see what a listing is paying out to a buyer agency because they don't anymore.
So that's the long and the short of it, but of course that is just the short of it. The long of it is all of the follow-up questions that homeowners have that are looking to sell, that sellers have, that buyers have, that buyers agents have, and that listing agents have, right? 4 different perspectives. And everyone's trying to navigate this, and they're all trying to CYA, Shawn. They're all trying to navigate it in their best interest.
Yes.
So, let's start from, I don't know, maybe the homeowner perspective. Okay, so you're selling a house. Now, a question I see that has popped up recently is how much money am I now going to be able to save, right, by the new rule change? Okay, so you're a seller. Commissions have always been negotiable. They are still negotiable. How much money are homeowners going to be able to save with this new commission rule change?
Well, it all depends on what the buyer's agent has signed with that buyer. That buyer broker agreement is required in the state of Virginia, state of Maryland, state of DC, and
state of DC
district.
Careful there.
Yeah, I know. And it's required. So prior to a buyer seeing any homes, they have a buyer broker agreement signed, and that has to be signed that says what that buyer broker is going to be paid. All right. So if they put whatever percentage, or it doesn't have to be a percentage. That's the other thing. It doesn't have to be X percent in there. It could be a dollar figure. It could be anything. So what has changed is now when you go and write the contract, you're going to put that number that you wrote in your buyer broker agreement in the contract. So really, if they put 2%, then maybe you're saving a little bit. If they put 1%, then you're saving a little bit.
If the buyer broker puts, I'm getting paid $1 million on their buyer broker agreement, the seller doesn't have to pay that.
They don't have to pay that. That's correct. It's a negotiation on the contract. So if they put $1 million in the buyer broker agreement and they only give $100,000, then the buyer has to make up the difference. And I've never seen one for $1 million, but that gives you a great example of how that buyer, if they sign that agreement, they have to make up the difference somehow. And so that could cause some problems.
What I'm getting at is the seller doesn't have to pay the number that's on the buyer broker agreement.
Correct. And that's the difference. So before, there was a cooperation between buyer and seller brokerages, and that was signed at the listing stage on the listing. And so then the seller was required to pay out what was on that, which was a listing agent commission and a buyer agent commission. But now that buyer agency commission is gone off the listing agreement. So now all that has to be on there is a listing agreement. And then you can say whether you want to cooperate in paying a buyer agency, but that really, just to simplify it, is now all on the contract. It's a negotiated item. It's a seller net. And if the seller doesn't like the net, they can change it. But the buyer has to be aware that if the amount that the seller is willing to pay is different from the amount that they have signed that agreement for, then they are liable to make up that difference.
So walk me through this and let's just use like low dollar figures, because if we start using percentages, that just gets weird.
Sure.
So if I'm selling my house and there's no other offer and you bring me an offer as a buyer's agent and it says, hey, we're asking for $5 as the buyer agent fee, I'm probably going to be more likely to pay that. Looking at the net terms, the right net sales price minus any subsidies, including a buyer's agent compensation. But if there's multiple offers, Shawn, and 4 or 5, or Northern Virginia, 10 or 12 different offers come in with different real estate agents, and honestly, maybe even unrepresented buyers, right? That the buyer's agents that are asking for the most amount of help, most amount of subsidy, most amount of buyer agent compensation negotiating on the contract, if I'm a seller, I'm probably not willing to pay any, or dare I say all of that.
Correct. And that's the thing. This is what you have to understand, is where it gets really interesting is in competition. So if you have one buyer broker and you have an offer at $1 million and one buyer broker says, you have to pay me $5, and so that makes it really difficult. Say if an offer at $10, right?
Make it even.
$10. And one buyer broker is offering $5 and the other buyer broker is charging $3. Which one are you going to take? You're going to take the $3 one. So a lot of these, that's where we don't know when we're writing an offer. We're blind to the fact that now our commission rate that we are charging and putting in this contract is a negotiated item, and it could come down to the seller net. And so there's one person that's offering a higher amount on the contract, but less commission. They could win the deal because they don't have that commission rate. So that's where it becomes a difficult thing for buyers and buyer brokerages. And then it comes down to, well, all right, I'm representing you as a buyer and you're not getting the offer, but it's a $5 difference. Matt asks me will you reduce your commission by $5? Well, now you have to negotiate here too. And so it becomes a really maybe tough situation in a lot of instances in the future where you might be negotiating commissions. And that's the reason you have to have a buyer broker agreement signed beforehand. Because listen, we're doing a ton of work prior to clients writing an offer. We're taking our time out of our weekends, out of our whenever to show properties and know neighborhoods and all that stuff. And then we have to negotiate items, and then we lose offers. And, I have buyers out right now that I've lost a couple offers on, or they just go sour, or we just can't negotiate terms or whatever it is. So this is time and energy and money that we need to be compensated for. And I know there's a lot of people that are out there that are against buyer agency and they don't want to pay anything. And you're like used car salesman and all this other stuff. And it's like, listen, you can say whatever you want, but really you have zero idea of what actually happens and how much work goes into this job. And for you to just, blanketly say, oh, you guys don't do anything, you don't need to be paid anything, that's crap. Come be in our shoes and try this job, and then we'll see if you think you deserve to be paid. The difference is that we don't know what we're going to be paid, or we don't know if we're going to be paid because we have a finite time to find a buyer of property. And if we don't find that buyer of the property in that finite time, our agreement's gone. We got paid nothing. So just think about that for a little bit in your cozy job when you're sitting behind your desk and you're getting paid whatever it is because you signed the contract and you have a salary. And we don't have a salary. We don't have health insurance. We don't have any of that stuff. And we're helping people achieve something that, is part of the American dream.
There's a lot of ways that I want to kind of tangent off of that.
Okay.
I guess the first thing is, when you're negotiating commissions on the sales contract, I'm curious, at what point is the buyer going to walk away because they don't want to pay out of pocket? Because in Virginia, on that buyer representation form, you have the buyer agent's compensation, but what you also have is how much you're going to be asking for in the contract, right? So if the buyer compensation is $10 on line 1, right below that it says, hey, we're going to be asking for $10 in the contract. So when you start to work with your buyer and then you go to write an offer and they say they have 10 offers, well, you're still going to ask for the $10 in the contract, and the buyers shouldn't be surprised by that. But, my question is, at what point when that contract comes back and that 10 is slashed down to like $2 or $1, now all of a sudden the buyer has to come up out of pocket $9. By the way, as of today, buyers are not allowed to finance the commissions. Okay, so I don't quite understand how it'll work of like, oh, raise the sales price and then include the subsidy when that's, obviously being, financed. But lenders are cracking down on this, and lenders are going to be asking for, buyer agency agreements to really understand that they're not going to be financing commissions at this point. So Shawn, when it comes to a buyer walking away when negotiating the commission on the sales contract, at what point do you think there's going to be that breaking point there?
Well, that's the tough thing. And I have to reread this buyer agreement and just know that every buyer agreement is different in every state. So it doesn't matter where you're signing these things. And it could be jurisdictionally too. So
yeah, I got to jump in on that point. Some states, maybe Maryland, I don't know if it's Maryland, but I'm reading so many different Facebook forums and whatnot. There's a sheet that explicitly states how much the seller is willing to compensate the buyer's agent, before a showing,
Maryland, yeah.
And a buyer's agent will give you the sheet to sign, or the other way around. It is the biggest workaround ever, and everyone knows that the DOJ is paying very, very close attention to this. So any sort of wink, wink, hint, hint, buyer agent friendly, or we really, really, really like buyer's agents, any sort of things like that. That is explicitly prohibited and will come back to bite any agent that thinks they're smarter than the Department of Justice.
Well, it's not prohibited yet because it's only prohibited on the MLS. But you're right.
Okay.
The DOJ is going to come back and say, dude, you can't offer anything. You have to understand this is the way it's going to be in the future. So it's easier if you guys just, and the way I'm thinking of it is, it's a negotiation on the sales contract. That's all. If you're asking for a buyer agency commission, put it in the contract. Don't call me and ask me if we're willing to do that. Just put it in your offer. And naturally, we're going to look at the offer and we're going to say whether the seller wants to take it based on a net. That's the way it should work. And that's the way that as a listing agent, I'm telling my clients, listen, you're going to see the contract. It's going to have a buyer agency commission in there probably. And you have to make that decision if you're going to take the contract based on the net. And so what I do at the very beginning, and I said this before, at a listing side, and I have to be careful with this because some people yelled at me online because of what I said. But
a lot of people yell at Shawn online.
It's I want my clients as a seller to know what their net could be if they have to pay out a buyer agent commission. And so what I say is, this is kind of the range or the typical area of what you should expect a buyer agent to put in a contract, because that's and it's not set in stone. It's a negotiation every single time, but this is what you should expect. And so I give that net sheet to my seller prior to them signing a listing agreement. But at the same time, in my listing agreement, I don't have a commission to the buyer agent. I don't have anything like that. Are you willing to negotiate with the buyer? Sure. Yes, we are. But I think that it's got to be separated and just say, like I said, why is this so difficult? Just put it in your offer and we'll deal with it then. Where it will become difficult is when there's competition, man. Mm-hmm. And that's where agents are going to get mad and buyers are going to get mad. And we could see a lot of this going back and forth because, oh, I lost it because I had to pay you a commission, or, oh, I lost it because we had to put this in the contract. Well, you signed a buyer broker agreement that says that you will put this into the contract. So you have to then write your best offer above that. And that's where you're going to lose. Now, the other thing in this, and I got in trouble for saying this too, was an early termination fee. And I don't think there's a line in our buyer broker agreement for this, but I'm thinking in other terms, you write this in because, and a lot of people gave me flack for this, but truthfully, this is what could happen. I'm representing Matt as a buyer. Matt writes a contract, and I think in our contract, you can just early terminate. That's the case, right?
You can terminate.
Just early terminate anytime you want by notice. You give notice to me. And
written notice,
it's gone, right? So why would I then sign a contract with somebody that can then just, after they lose an offer and they're mad, after I've done all of this work, you can just get out of the offer or get out of the buyer agreement by just giving me notice. What kind of contract is that? That's not a solid contract. And if I'm working and taking, and what you have to understand is that we all have families and we're all out there whenever anybody wants to see it. And guess when that is? A lot of times on the weekends when everybody else is enjoying their life and going out and having fun and going away for the weekends, we're sitting here and we're showing properties, and then a buyer can just pull out of a buyer agreement but for nothing? No, I don't think so. If I'm taking that time away from my family and away from everybody, and I'm using my expertise to help a buyer find a property, well then if you early terminate, you're going to have to pay me a dollar figure, because I'm not going to let you out of a contract just because you want to weasel out, or just go to the listing agent and say, well, the listing agent will write it for me, and you let me out of the contract. I don't think so.
Did someone
you have
early
to be hard about this?
Did someone early terminate on you like last week?
No. There was I was talking to a buddy of mine, a friend of mine, and they said that this happened to them, and they let them out of the contract, and they just went directly to the listing agent and wrote the contract.
Well, there's something in there where if one party terminates and there's like a 30-day period, something like that.
Yeah, there's
where
a
you can't
30-day
just
period.
go and buy the same house. Now,
but if you
we heard a
release them-
story.
here's the thing:
It's like a mutual release.
it was a release.
Okay.
She was like, should I just release them? And then I found out that they went and just wrote on the same property that I just wrote on, and the seller wouldn't accept the offer. They terminated the buyer agreement and then went to the listing agent and had them write the offer that was accepted by the sellers, then negating the buyer
that's
agency
terrible.
commission. That's terrible. Yeah. And so the thing is, yes, the buyer agency agreement, it protects us as buyer agents when we show a property, and then if you write, and you can put a day figure in there. I typically put 30 days. After the termination of this buyer agreement, if it's a property that I've shown you that then you go right on, I'm protected that I still get paid a commission for that time period. So, but if you terminate the buyer agency agreement, which this agent did, they terminated it, it's gone. That no longer is in effect. So all those properties that you showed prior are now off the table, and they can go back and write the offer. So in my opinion, to protect agents from the hard work that we do, that's what you should be doing, is putting an early termination fee in there. As my buyers, I'm going to say, listen, I'm going to give you the best service, and I'm going to show you. And when I can't show you, a teammate's going to show you, and we're going to get you in there, and we're going to get you the offer that you want and the house you want and everything else. But if you early terminate on me because you want to kind of go behind the scenes like this, well, there's got to be a penalty.
Why would a buyer sign an early termination agreement?
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, what if the service is horrible? What if they're not just happy with the service? And in that instance, if you completely hate me, which I've never had anybody come and say that, but
how could you hate Shawn?
I mean, no, I'm sure there's people that hate me. But like, I've never been in that situation where a buyer said, I can't stand you. I don't want to use you anymore. I'm out of here.
What you do is you sign the week-long, right?
Yeah.
You sign a couple week-long, like a 7-day agreement, right?
Yeah, and that's the
then
thing.
you sign, and then you build it up. You build up the trust, and then say, hey, listen, now that we have this relationship, now that you know my expertise, you know what the experience is like, let's lock it in.
Yeah, and that's the way you should do it. It's like, and that's the way I always felt with new buyers that I'm just meeting. I'm like, you don't know me from anybody. You might have seen my reviews online. So we might not be a good mix. So let's just sign this for a short term. Let's see how it goes over that short term. I'm doing this for nothing at that point, because after 7 days, it's gone. You don't owe me anything. And then let's lock in for a longer time, because, now I'm putting in real effort. And, the couple buyers that I have right now that I've been working for 4 months, it's been a lot of work. And, when I'm not here, or over the summer when I'm on vacation, I'm paying agents for the services of showing my clients doors. So I'm already losing money because I'm having them show properties while I'm gone. And that's kind of what you have to do,
I think what I've been reading as we look at the 4 perspectives of sellers, buyers agents, listing agents. From buyers agents, it's, I don't work for free. It's something along the lines of, like, why don't you just tell me what the commission is you're offering, because I don't work for free. If you were leading an army of like 500 buyers agents, what are you telling these agents? Because what I'm thinking is the whole, goal of this lawsuit is decoupling the commission. All right, for those of you out there, decoupling means to separate, right? Seller pays seller agent, buyer pays buyer agent. So the buyer's agents out there, Shawn, that are saying, I don't work for free, or my services aren't free, which, by the way, a lot of buyer's agents were saying their services were free.
They were,
just
dude.
a couple years
and
ago.
Some agent was like, we've never said that. No one's ever
They're
said that.
going
I'm
to deny
like,
it, but
dude,
it was out there.
Said it.
It was out there. So for the agents that are saying, I don't, they're puffing up their chest, I don't work for free, why do I need to negotiate my commission? What would you tell those buyer's agents?
Well, this is a free market, and you can lose business by not being flexible. If you feel like your services aren't free, and they are not, you have to pay for them, and you're worried about getting paid, then there is a world out there of how you can change that agreement to make you happy. And if that is, hey, for every house that I show you, I want X amount of dollars, maybe that's the way it is. I don't know. Maybe you have a fee up front that is held in escrow or by the company. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about that. But you're right. You're a buyer agent, and your services are not free. Your buyer needs to be paying you for the service that they're giving you. The good thing is our contract supports the fact that you can get paid by the seller on the contract. So if I'm telling an army of agents, negotiate it on the contract, have your buyer agreement firm, have an early termination fee on there, because you aren't working for free. You need to get paid if they feel like these people are going to backstab you. And I'm not saying like you're always going to see this, because it's rare that you see a buyer have the gall to say, I need out of this agreement, and then go backstab you and write on something without you. But it happens a lot.
But I think we will see more unrepresented buyers. There's studies out there with everything going on that something like 88% of real estate transactions still use a buyer's agent, right? Out of all of the, flat fee brokers, hey, just go to a real estate attorney, hey, use this. Overwhelmingly, the public has decided that they want to use a real estate agent. Now, things, are changing in terms of commission amounts, but for all the backlash, people still choose to use a professional.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can use a lawyer, but the funny thing is, we talked about this the other day and somebody commented on this. It was like, oh yeah, go ahead. And it was a lawyer actually commenting, I'll just write the contract for you, blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, he's going to charge the same amount anyways. He's probably charging you X amount of dollars, and the contract that he writes is like, I don't know, man. Like, it just depends. But you can use a professional in any way, but just know that the lawyer is going to charge you up front. They're going to say, no, that's the difference. Like, you want a lawyer? Here's my rate. You want a buyer agent? Here's my rate. So you got to sign that agreement.
You got one more thing?
Well, you were saying unrepresented buyers, and this is going to happen a lot more if you want to get into this section. In the listing agreement, we've stated this before, there is now a section that says, how much more will a seller pay for an unrepresented buyer? Now think about this. If you are willing to pay a commission to a buyer agent to represent a buyer, I can't do dual agency. I'm not doing dual agency. Dual agency means that I can represent the buyer and seller in one transaction. I'm not doing that, okay? In the state of Virginia, state of Maryland, dual agency means something different. It means one brokerage. Dual agency in Virginia means one agent, right? So I, as an agent in the state of Virginia, do not practice dual agency. What I will do, however, is disclose that I represent the listing, the seller. And buyer, if you want to write a contract and you're like adamant, I don't want a buyer agency, I'm not signing anything, but will you write the contract for me? Will you do ministerial acts? It's allowed in this state. I have to say, I am not representing you. You have to sign this agreement that says, I do not represent you. I will write what you want, the terms you want in the contract. It's called ministerial acts. And I will let you into the house to do your home inspection and, get the title company all work together and all that stuff. But for that, for me to do that service, it's an added service other than the listing side. And it's an unrepresented buyer that I now have to deal with and write and do all these other things, not representing. I'm going to charge a fee. And that fee is X percent, whatever I feel that is worth. And that has to be put in the listing agreement when you're signing it. Or you could go back and say, hey, seller, I have an unrepresented buyer. Would you be okay if I did ministerial acts for this, but I'm going to have to charge you a little bit more? Do you want to sign that agreement? Sure. Okay. Now I can then represent the seller, do ministerial acts for the buyer, and get the deal done. And this is happening more and more, and it's going to happen a lot more. As a listing agent, you're going to be approached by buyers that say, I'm just coming to the open house. I'm going to open houses now, and I'm going to ask the listing agent to write it for me. Well, you're doing more, and you better charge for that, in my opinion.
So good points. So to wrap it up, just touching on the 4 perspectives again, and let me know if I'm off base on any of these perspectives. I'll rattle them off. So for the sellers, for the homeowners out there, I think what I'm telling the homeowners is expect, and you had mentioned this before, Shawn, expect some sort of ask in the contract, some sort of negotiation. There will be those multiple offers scenarios where I think the buyer's agent commission will be dwindled down to maybe even nothing on the sales contract. But, if you own, a $300,000, I'm trying to think of like a low price point. If you own clearly like a first-time home buyer, starter home-esque type of property, you should fully expect that home buyer just doesn't have the cash on hand to pay their real estate agent directly. So they're going to be requesting that money in the contract. As the listing agent, I think we can both agree that we're going to, charge whatever our listing fee is. And then while we're not going to put a specific amount in our listing agreements that we're going to encourage the sellers to expect, we will say that, hey, a lot of these buyers that are going to come are going to ask for anywhere from X percent to X percent in the sales contract. Let's focus on our net sales price. For buyers agents, get those buyer agreements signed. Your buyer should pay you. That's how it works. Buyer pays the buyer agent. And yeah, those are my thoughts.
That's exactly it. It should be as simple as buyer agent pays buyer, or buyer pays buyer agent, seller pays seller agent. If you need some sort of subsidy to help you pay for that, then you put it in the sales contract. End of story.
Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below if you agree or disagree, which I think a lot of you do for some reason. All right, let's move on to our next topic. Shawn, this is a story that just broke overnight. Local company accused of illegally giving luxury yacht parties and other kickbacks to real estate agents in exchange for business. 4 real estate title companies involved in the new D.C. Attorney General settlement all deny any wrongdoing. Okay, so 4 companies have to pay upwards of $3.9 million, including one company that is paying $1.9 million. By the way, I don't know where they're going to come up with this money to pay. That's like $2 million for an illegal kickback scheme. Okay, so let's rewind. In the District of Columbia, you cannot pay any kind of compensation or consideration in exchange for a referral. Shawn, this is RESPA. This was from like 1974. You can't just, recommend a service and then get $20 back. That doesn't work that way. That is an illegal kickback. So reading from the article, whether it's a cash payment, whether it's a payment disguised as an ownership in a joint venture that comes in the form of a distribution or a dividend, or whether it's elaborate yacht parties that people are invited to, all of that is illegal. So essentially what was happening is these title companies were reaching out to agents and inviting them to create a joint venture, like an LLC, and saying, hey, you're going to be like a part owner, basically, and what you're going to do is you're going to give an affiliated business agreement to your clients, and you're going to encourage them to use, our company, the title company, for closings, for real estate closings. Everything's going to be above board. We're not doing anything wrong because we're disclosing this information. And then at the end of the quarter, the end of the year, whatever money's in the pot, you're going to get however much, your clients contributed, however much, your clients participated or, closed on the sales. And so that's kind of how it worked. And apparently that is illegal. Okay, you can't do that. So says the Attorney General. All 4 companies, deny the wrongdoing, but immediately paid the fines. And there's, screenshots in the article of like yacht trip, like thank you settlement company, like you're the best. So Shawn, what are your thoughts on title companies giving real estate agents yacht parties?
Yeah, this is a slippery slope, man. This is tough. Kickbacks are not allowed in real estate. We were approached multiple times by title companies, and I always felt like this is not what I wanted to participate in. And I think Matt and I made the decision together to not do that because we wanted to refer clients to title companies that we liked.
Well, what did they tell us? Because it was pretty enticing. Not going to lie.
Very
how
enticing.
much did they say we were going to make?
tens of thousands of dollars.
I mean, they were saying some agents were making what, like 200, like they said, I swear they said one agent was making like $300,000 like per year.
Yeah. I mean, so there were conversations in there, and that's the thing is we ultimately said no thank you. And because it's a slippery slope, and I don't want to go into the legalities of it because I don't know the legalities of it. I know that they were creating LLCs on the backside, and like Shawn Battle I don't want to put myself, maybe I wasn't part of an LLC, but like that agent would be part of an LLC that they would create under a new name, and that's how they were. But the thing the article doesn't disclose is that there were disclosures that had to happen, right? So anytime that said agent referred this title company, the buyer would have to sign a disclosure, and a seller. They could refer a seller to that title company as well. They would have to sign a disclosure that says that, there is an affiliation. Agent A is an owner of an LLC that is somehow
has ownership interest
in this venture. And so this agent will make money based on that. And so that disclosure had to be signed, I believe, anytime that there was a transaction. For me, I just felt like I just didn't want to be a part of it. And that's the end story of it. And I don't want to get too deep into this because I know a lot of people involved in this. And so, but you make choices, and sometimes those choices are good and sometimes they're bad. And thankfully, Matt and I decided that wasn't in our best interest, and we wanted to refer people to the companies that we liked because we liked those companies and they treated our clients fairly. And that's ultimately why we decided not to do that.
So one of the title companies, they denied all the wrongdoings. They said that DC Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking officially recognizes that these arrangements are legal. These arrangements meaning the joint ventures. So essentially what's happening is RESPA from like 1974, I don't know, it might be 1979 if, I'm taking a real estate exam, says that you can't have kickbacks. Apparently there's a way to do like a backdoor sort of, hey, if it's an LLC, if it's a joint venture, it can kind of sort of maybe be above board. But I remember being on that call and thinking, like, I almost felt silly asking the question. I was like, wait, isn't this exactly what is not allowed? We give you clients, you give us money. So they're creating these things, and ultimately just didn't pass the smell test. And I don't. The yacht party looks kind of fun, but like if you're being invited on a yacht trip to by a preferred vendor, it makes me wonder when you see in the listing that says seller prefers XYZ title company, what that really means is listing agent prefers yacht parties with XYZ title company, right?
Exactly.
That's what that means.
Every time I saw that in listing, I'm like, oh God, the seller doesn't even know what you're talking about. The seller doesn't prefer anybody unless they've had good experiences with title companies, which I definitely have had happen. But the way that this was working and I don't want to say it was legal or illegal because I don't know the law, but the way that it was explained to us is that it was legal because you were part owner in the company. It's not like you can be part owner in a title company and make money off that, but it has to be disclosed. And so that's how they were doing it. So you were part owner of this joint venture. Is that legal? That's for them to fight out.
Still kind of rubs me the wrong way. Like if you ever run into the real estate agents that are also mortgage brokers that are also like have their own title company, it's like, all right, what are you telling and not telling your clients?
Correct. And that's where it all comes out to be. And that's where we always want to be honest and truthful and tell people exactly what's going on. And that's why we try to keep our business on the up and up. And anyways, I feel bad for everybody involved. They kind of knew that it was maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, it's dicey. It's dicey. I think Shawn and I have both used at least one of these title companies before.
And we still use them. They're great companies.
Success.
That's what I want to say.
It's not like a scam.
Yeah, no.
It's not. I think one of the headlines said like it's inflating real estate prices.
No,
which
it's not.
It's
not true. And that's the thing is there is some false stuff in this article, and I have to say that. And one, one that they did not disclose that they had to sign a disclosure that says that there was this relationship. But two, these companies are great companies. They're up and up and they provide great services, and we've used them in the past. We've never received anything from it. They're good companies, and I don't want that to cloud this article to cloud that.
So all four title companies have immediately ceased their, joint ventures, the thing that the Attorney General said was illegal. So they immediately paid the fine and then immediately ceased doing the joint ventures.
And now what I also want to say is this is DC.
This is DC.
Virginia could be different. I don't,
they could be investigating stuff in Virginia. Yeah. I don't know. Or
so every jurisdiction could be different. Right. And I don't know how that's going to shake out, but
well, it's just a reminder that, if something is a little too good to be true, to then maybe pump your brakes and, ask your spouse, hey, does something sound fishy here?
Yeah. And in the end, I said, and I did talk to my spouse, and I said, you know what, it's not worth for me to risk my business to make a couple extra bucks. And that's just me. That was me.
All right, let's move on to the next topic. This comes to us from the Daily Mail and other sources. Cape Cod couple rage they cannot sell their $1.3 million home due to endless racket from neighboring pickleball courts. Shawn,
boy.
Pickleball making its way onto the Shawn and Matt show. So a legal battle has broken out after Massachusetts couple claimed that they were unable to sell their $1 million home due to an endless racket in a neighboring pickleball court. The couple originally listed the property for $1.3 million before slashing it to $995,000 and then delisting it altogether after spending 8 months on the market. Shawn, they are just 2 blocks from Sagamore Beach in Cape Cod. Apparently, it's a lovely, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom cottage, except for the fact that it neighbors the Sagamore Beach Colony Club, which has been in the neighborhood for over 110 years. And the pickleball courts were created about 4 years ago. So homeowner has claimed that she has since lodged complaints about the noise to the club and suggested using softer paddles or balls to muffle the sound, but has seen no success. And Shawn, I'll put up the photo if you're watching on YouTube. The courts honestly look like they're in the backyard of the house that's being sold. Okay, so there are, I would say, strong suggestions for where pickleball court. Now, should I issue a disclosure right now?
Yes, I think. I mean, let us know because
I am an avid pickleball player.
Matt is a mean pickleball player.
If I could play pickleball every single day for the rest of my life, I would die a happy man.
That's awesome.
So. Yeah. I'm not going to shove it down your throat. I'm not going to
But the fact that you found a sport that you enjoy that much, a lot of people never find that. And I suggest doing that. It is a ton of fun. I've played with Matt. Just know that there's a lot of pickleball injuries. People get into this.
Yeah, it's weirdly dangerous.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's important for the viewers and listeners to know that I would say I love playing pickleball, but you may hear a different perspective here because pickleball doesn't belong everywhere. First of all, I don't know the zoning in this county, township, district, but these courts are way too close to houses. Okay, so I don't know if it's either 300 or 500 feet, but the recommended distance from the nearest residence when you're building pickleball courts or when you're converting tennis courts into pickleball courts is at least 300. Why not? Let's just say 500 feet. It looks like these courts are 20 feet away.
Yeah, 20 to 30 feet, man. That's
if
way too
you
close.
are living in these houses, that would drive me insane.
Yeah.
Okay? I wouldn't be able to do anything inside these houses. So, first of all, I don't know. I mean, 110 years ago on Cape Cod seems like if you have Colony Club money, right? If you have the money, they can just, set up shop in this neighborhood. The fact that this private club was allowed to install pickleball courts 25 feet away from what looks like 4 or 5 houses is just a ludicrous idea to me that they thought this was a good idea. Now, if you're in the club, you're playing, who cares? But unless these 4 or 5 homeowners in the background put up a stark legal defense against this private country club, which, good luck going up against country club money and lawyers. It's just extremely disrespectful and doesn't really take into account the neighborhood. And it's actually very disappointing because this gives pickleball a bad name.
Yeah.
This gives pickleball the steamroller, name. It's like, all right, we don't care about our neighbors. We're going to put pickleball courts wherever we want. When in reality, that's not the ethos of pickleball. The ethos of pickleball is, hey, you've never played before, come join our foursome. We'll show you a few things. It's a welcoming sport. It's for all ages. It's for men. It's for women. It's for anyone who's interested. But to put pickleball courts 20 feet away from the houses, I don't think this is a case of, hey, maybe it was priced too high or maybe, the staging wasn't right. I think this is a case of you're seeing a property when you get off of work at 5:30 in the afternoon and people are playing pickleball for 4 hours in your backyard.
Yeah, this is disrespect. I mean, pickleball's fun, but it's not for everyone. It's not for everywhere, like Matt said. And how would you feel if all of a sudden one of these was created in your backyard? And I'm telling you, it's like donk, 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 donk,
thwack,
donk,
thwack,
yeah,
thwack, thwack,
donk, constantly. Could you imagine? And then people yelling, and like me when I play, I yell. Like I usually, unfortunately, it's profanity.
A lot
right?
of people. You're not alone in that.
I'm not supposed to. Yeah.
You're not alone in that.
But imagine that constantly. And, one thing I was thinking of is, wow, wonder if my first thought was I didn't know how close they were. I read the story and I'm like, I didn't know how close it was. So I was like, why wouldn't the homeowner invest in new windows, right? And say, like, let's soundproof this place. And instead of dropping the price by $300,000 or losing, and it sucks because they should have a right to defend themselves and maybe said country club should pay the difference in actual value because there's a tax assessed value there, and it was tax assessed before these pickleball courts were there, and that was showing what the county would thought that property was worth. Do something here, right? But the problem is, how can you? It's still going to be annoying. It doesn't matter if you put soundproofing there or not. You're still going to hear things. It's not going to be 100%. And let's be honest, location matters. It's a beautiful location. These people bought this beautiful place close to the beach. It's their beach house. And then all of a sudden, pickleball shows up in the backyard. Now, they knew that there was a country club in the backyard, but they didn't know that they were going to build pickleball courts. And so I think it's a slap in the face. I think it's money and power that is pushing this. And they're saying, you know what, we want it and we're going to do it. And we have members and this is what they want. And so we don't really care about you. And that's the unfortunate thing. And I don't know if that's what happened, but it seems like.
You know who should buy the house? The country club.
The country club.
The country club should buy the house.
Just buy the whole house and then rent it out. I mean,
we're calling it a country club. Maybe it's more of like a racket club.
Whatever it is. Yeah. I mean, so I think.
But if they bought the house, they just put another pickleball.
Yeah, they were right in between. But that's actually a really good idea. I mean, make it part of the whatever. I don't know. This is a really difficult situation. I would be so pissed. I just bought a beach house, and if the one thing we love about it is that it's so quiet. You were there, right?
Yeah.
And it's super quiet, but could you imagine if that showed up across the thing?
And this isn't something where you're complaining about airplane noise and the airport's been there for 100 years. Pickleball, while it was invented in 1965, it's obviously just come to fruition in the past 4 or 5 years. And so as a homeowner or resident or purchaser, you wouldn't know that a tennis court or maybe even an outdoor, multi-use court is going to be converted into a pickleball court. When I was living in Lion Village, someone moved away from the park because the sound of people hitting the tennis ball against the wall was just too loud. And, no way they would ever put a pickleball court in Lion Village. But, these are the things that you have to think about where if there's any sort of chance of any sort of pickleball. Now, I love pickleball. I would never want to live in this house. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's the same reason that I love golf. But I would never want to live on the fairway of the first hole 200 yards up on the right-hand side where everyone slices it. Yeah. Right? And then, you don't get to live on a golf course and then complain about balls, coming into your yard or hitting your house or whatever.
You got to know what to
just
expect.
comes with it. Now, if they change the layout of the golf course, if they do, if they install driving, whatever, that's different. But for something like this just strikes me as a gross negligence of neighborly duty of being. You tell me you're a part of the community for 110 years, and you're gonna install something that causes such a nuisance in your own neighborhood.
Let me play devil's advocate on this. What do we know if these courts were they just transferred into pickleball? Was this tennis courts beforehand?
I cannot confirm or deny. I don't know.
I would wonder if, when you have something in the back of your property and it's there, and there were tennis courts there before, and now they're just transferred to pickleball, which a lot of places have done. You can see them all over the place where they had 15 tennis courts and now 10 of them are pickleball and 5 of them are still tennis. So in my opinion, in this regard, if those tennis courts were already there that close and they bought the property knowing that there's tennis courts and you transferred them to pickleball, yes, the noise is going to be annoying and it's going to be a problem and it'll probably reduce your value a little bit. But if the tennis courts were there in the first place, you bought the property with knowing that tennis courts were there, and that automatically you should have paid less because of that feature being behind your house. Right?
So I agree with what you said. One of the subcaptions says the pickleball courts were created about 4 years ago, which makes me think that they were brand new from the ground up. And they're also dedicated courts. Like it doesn't look like a massive tennis court had been converted. It looks like they built a privacy fence. They did the lines. They had the distance for around the post.
Looks like they built it from the ground up.
It looks like they built it from the ground up.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going with. Yeah. Disappointing. I don't know what the solution is. I think the solution is, I guess, relisted at a lower price. And, the thing is, like, if you're watching this and you're like, who cares? Like, if you don't like your neighbor, buy your neighbor, right? And, you can say that up to a certain point, but if your neighbor is causing you a serious pain and suffering of an absurd amount of noise next door. I mean, we always hear about people complaining about airplane noise, and it's one person that calls 5,000 times.
Yeah.
I might be the person that calls 5,000 times if there is some sort of absurdly loud disturbance of the peace right in my backyard.
Yeah, imagine that. I mean, how frustrating that can be. Over and over again, you're trying to have dinner and donk, you're working from home. It's just, you're sleeping. And hopefully there's no lights. I didn't see any lights there.
No lights.
Okay. So that at least at dark, it's quiet and you can sleep. But man, all day long. And you go to the beach to enjoy the beach and the quiet and then, you got that happening. Anyways, sad situation, stinks. I think they should remedy it in some way, help these people out and either buy the property or do something to remedy it.
Yeah, definitely do a satellite view of your next house that you're going to buy and look at the surrounding tennis courts that could become something else in the future.
True.
All right, Shawn, let's move on to in or out, whether Shawn battles in or out on a house in the United States. Let's go to Potomac, Maryland. Okay, Shawn, let me introduce you to 11540 Springridge Rd, listed for $2.75. It's 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 3,100 square feet, Shawn. Okay, so perched above the Potomac, this house is just 15 minutes from the D.C. border. Its most striking feature are the 14-foot walls of glass that look out on the Potomac and offer an incredible view from almost every single room. Okay, so there's also a full-size tennis court as well as a chicken coop and a goat run with wooded trails and fire pit. The home feels like it's sitting in the middle of the Shenandoah. The previous owners were actually going to sell to a developer before neighbors purchased the home last year, turned it into a guest house. Now it's back on the market, Shawn, for $2.75 million. Are you in or out on the Potomac home overlooking the river?
Wow. This is right up my alley. I love the mid-century modern look, love the glass walls, love bringing nature in kind of feel. So originally, right off the bat, I was like, yes, I'm buying this thing. I think it's amazing. However, 3,100 square feet,
It's small.
It's not big.
It's small.
And for $2.75 million, I felt like, all right, well, I don't mind that size of house. My last house was about that big, right? Somewhere around there. The mid-century modern that I owned in Lake Barcroft was about this size. It's a good size house, and it's all you need. However, at 2.75 million, and Potomac, Maryland, I don't sell a ton in Potomac, Maryland, so I don't know the price where that should be right off the bat. But it feels slightly high in the size of the home. I'm a buyer, but probably not at 2.75.
Not at 2.75. Yeah. Shawn, when I'm looking at this house and something struck me about the description, it looks like a guest house. Like it feels like a house you would hang out there for a week or for a weekend. They have a desk here. I'm going to be honest, I could not imagine working right here because I'd be so distracted by the lovely, like what I need for an office is just like a pitch black room with like one light above, right? Because like the goal is to work. I mean, you could say, oh, I want to be inspired, but there's being inspired, there's being distracted.
Yeah.
So I think I'm gonna parrot what you just said. I think I'm in. I think I'm in at a lower price. I think it's a little too small. I think it's a fantastic property, and I'm gonna be jealous of whoever buys it. But I don't know, maybe at 2.375. I think that's where I feel like this property is worth. And the goat run is kind of cool. The chicken coop is kind of cool. This is like the least DC house in Potomac, Maryland, that I think you could ever have.
Does it say what acreage it is? Or
4 acres.
Oh, it's a big
4 acres.
That's why. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
So
if you want acreage, then maybe it does justify the price a little bit more. I just didn't like the size of the house for that price. And a lot of people don't care about the land, in this area. It's like, oh, I got 4 acres. Okay. But maybe you do, and maybe that's your thing. So, but for me, I need it lower.
You need it lower. Yeah. All right. Well, let us know if you're in or out in the comment section below. And for Shawn and myself, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, we'll see you then.
Take care.